Hey there, dual credit friends. I just wanted to talk to you really quickly about these three Flannery O'Connor stories that you just read. And then, obviously these are presented in this biographical context. So that's the essay that I've chosen to have you guys write. I know we use like some really weird stuff like border theory, and I was kind of toying with having you guys do like absurdism or something like that. But I decided that I want to keep this really simple. And so I think this is probably the easiest thing to do. So basically, how this chapter of this book is set up, obviously, if you read it already, you got some kind of like introductory material on what to do when you're writing biographical criticism, right? Then you read these three stories by Flannery O'Connor, and then there's a series of questions at the end. There's also some random articles that people wrote about Flannery O'Connor. There's letters that she wrote back and forth to different people, experiences from her life, things like that. And then all of that kind of comes together, and you're supposed to use that to write an essay. So I guess like really quickly looking at those three stories, you've got everything that rises must converge. You've got good country people, and a good man is hard to find. So even just looking at those kind of on face value, there's similarities in the narrative perspective, right? Like pretty obviously. There's similarities in the settings, right? There's similarities in even some of the characters or the way the characters even relate to race. You could look at just race in this. So what you would essentially do if you were going to write a piece of biographical criticism is you could look at these three stories, or even just one of these stories generally, and then do some research on Flannery O'Connor's life, her political views, maybe her things that happened to her, biographical information, whatever, where she grew up, where she lived, what happened in her love life, whatever, all that kind of stuff. And then you would use that, and here's the crux, you use that to interpret the story, to point something out in this story that so you can understand that story in a deeper way. I say that's the crux because the danger, when this is the danger, right? There's always a danger. The danger with biographical criticism is that you end up just writing a biography, which is totally not what this is. It's not a Wikipedia article about Flannery O'Connor. You're supposed to do research on her life until you find something about her life that you think is significant as it relates to the story, not just something that's significant. Like, say, Flannery O'Connor, maybe she, like, I don't know, maybe she had like a child out of wedlock with the Duke of Edinburgh or something like that. Just made that up, whatever. But like that might have nothing to do with the stories that she wrote. But maybe you find out that like, I don't know, maybe you find out that she was whoa, there's a butterfly out. Sorry about that. I got distracted by the butterfly. Maybe you find out that she had some sort of, I don't know, like she was maybe raised by an African American woman or something like that. And like maybe that would then obviously have some effect on her view of race relations. Or maybe she was like, I don't know. Yeah, whatever. You see, you kind of get where I'm going here? Like you got to find something about her life that seems relevant enough to write about. So now here's the important piece too. If you go to page 469 in your textbook there, suggestions for writing, there are like three specific questions there. So suggestions for writing, right? Question three, Gene W. Cash's biography, Flannery O'Connor, A Life, provides details about O'Connor's experience at Georgia State College for Women in the 1940s, when she was planning to be a cartoonist and contributed cartoons as well as writings to the school's publications. And then here's the prompt. Write an essay in which you use this biographical information as an insight into one or more of O'Connor's stories. For instance, identify two or three scenes in a story and analyze their effects as primary physical comedy or visual effect similar to that in cartoons, right? So there's a perfect example of biographical criticism. You do the research, which the book has already done for you because this is kind of your example chapter, right? So you do research until you find out something about the author's life or their experiences that you think will help you interpret their writing in a meaningful way. So in this case, oh, look, surprise! Flannery O'Connor was a cartoonist. So let's take that idea. In what way is her writing similar to a cartoon, right? Like punchlines and stuff like that. Um, so like cartoons driven by physical comedy, right? Like characters doing things like, right? Like that kind of stuff. So in what way do we see that in her stories? Pick a story, write it. There's a great essay right there. Question 4, write an essay interpreting some aspect of one of O'Connor's stories in light of information about O'Connor's life. This one's pretty broad, but this is literally what you're doing, right? Be sure to cite Flannery O'Connor's own words from her letters and essays, excerpt in this chapter, from the critical essays or from other sources. What does the biographical context help to explain? What qualities or aspects of the story does your biographical approach not account for, right? And you're always going to have failings with a biographical approach. And here's the other crux. This is the other like pitfall, right? First pitfall, we already talked about. Second pitfall is this, the author, right? So when we say author, you have the author, Flannery O'Connor, and then you've got the narrator, and those two things are different. We've already talked about this in class. I think we did this before the COVID-19 shutdown and stuff. But that's a super important distinction. So the essay that I do not want to see is for you to say, hey, look, Flannery O'Connor, the author, is actually the narrator of this story, because that's just categorically not true. The example that I gave you guys in class when we made this distinction, I believe it was like I could personally, like, look, here I am, a white middle-aged balding male. I could write a story from my perspective now, right? But then my perspective is going to change. So, like Tom, the person, the author, will continue on, whereas that narrator will stay stuck in that spot. So the narrator is never the author. That is not an essay that I want to read. So that's pitfall number 2. Whatever. So what you can do though, right, again, is you're going to find some aspect of this author's life that you think has somehow affected their their writing, or specifically one of their stories. If you want to use multiple stories, power to you. If you want to use a single story, power to you. So that's kind of a quick rundown. That's why we read this section here. I've only got one more section for you. It's monsters. After that, we're going to have the test, and then we're going to move on to poetry. And I'm probably going to combine poetry and drama. So we'll just combine that into one test because we've only got, what, I think like less than 6 weeks left. Which by design, like I was going to cover those things kind of more in depth, but once the COVID-19 thing happened, I basically cut my workload in half for you guys because, like, you know what, I don't want to overwhelm you or anything like that. So we'll just combine those two things. So the only thing we have left in this class then is we've got this one more monsters reading, the test for short story, which will be a full on like 100-point test. Then we've got the essay that you're going to write here, which I'll give you a due date, and I'll post another video that like explains this more in depth and explains the assignment sheet. And then we've also got a poetry and drama test, and then that'll be the end of it. So hopefully that makes sense. If you have any questions, you can always email me. Have a good day.